welcome Mr. Patrick James, Paddy, Dr. Gaines to the Move Standard. The Dr. Gaines will make a little bit more sense as we get into the podcast, but welcome, mate. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, brother.
For those of you who don't know for those of people who don't know who you are, and they should know who you are, tell them a little bit about you. I don't know why I always struggle to call you Patrick James. Maybe it's because it's two first names. Maybe it's because I know you as Paddy so well.
I've got four first names. I've got two middle names as well. So I'm Patrick Henry Arthur James.
Well, there we go. It's a very regal name, mate. But
yeah, it is.
Give the audience a little bit of background. Obviously, coach at March On. Tell people what life is like day to day for you, and we'll roll from there.
Yeah, so I'm Paddy or Patrick, whatever. I don't have a preference, and I'm head coach at March On Victoria. So prior to that, I mean, I've been in the fitness industry pretty much since I graduated university. So I went to uni, did sports science, found CrossFit when I was doing my undergraduate degree in sports science, and kind of fell in love with that. Had, as most people do that start CrossFit, have delusions thinking that they could make it as a professional CrossFit athlete, and that was when it was in the glory days, like 2013, like proper Rich Froning era. It was the good times.
The Nano 2 days.
Yeah, red Nano 2s. Yeah, serious.
You know.
Yeah, and board shorts down to your knees.
I actually pulled a pair of them out of my drawer the other day. I gave them away, but they were the Reebok.
That was a look. So yeah, that's when I started CrossFit back then, and at the same time, the head coach the owner was looking for some people to help out, coach some classes here and there. He was like, do you want to, we can put you through, or you can put yourself through the level 1 and we can get you coaching. And I was like, sick. I was going to get paid to do some coaching alongside my degree, which was ideal. I loved training in the gym, was there all the time. I loved, everything to do with CrossFit, was fully immersed in it. Then managed to get myself a job straight after university, coaching full time in a CrossFit gym out in the Middle East. So Kuwait, Dubai, Qatar, Bahrain, CrossFit gyms were popping up everywhere, and it was a really good way of people being able to do full-time work. So they were offering salaries, accommodation paid for, so it was sweet. So for a 21-year-old that wanted to train 3 times a day and coach 4 hours, it was unbelievable. So did that for a couple of years, and that was kind of where I started cutting my teeth in the industry. When I came back to the UK after that, I did a couple of dipping in and out with other bits and bobs for a few years, realised I wanted to get back into the fitness industry, and then got myself a job through the connections that I made in the Middle East in Hong Kong. Was coaching for a CrossFit gym out in a CrossFit gym in Hong Kong, and that's when I realised I wasn't going to, it wasn't then that I realised I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, but I'd realised a while ago. But and that was when I actually, going into the topics, some of the topics we'll talk about today, I was getting, as most people do and did, savage quad and patella tendinopathies, just like to the point where I thought that I'd actually torn a part of my tendon because of how painful it was. Like, couldn't do anything with how inflamed it was, doing 5K running plans alongside doing a Smolov junior squat program, alongside doing paleo diet, alongside whatever, just literally throwing the kitchen sink at everything.
Forgot about paleo diet.
Yeah, paleo. I got shredded. I did the first. I did a slight tangent. I did the first year of uni just drinking, playing rugby, just getting quite fat, and then the summer of the first year, I was really into CrossFit, paleo, training 3 times a day, and got completely shredded to the bone. I had like about 5 kilos of muscle mass on me, but and then so then when I went to Hong Kong was when I was surrounded by people that were actually so if anyone knows who Ed Haynes is, he's quite well respected in the industry. He's not that well known over here, but in Asia he's very well known. He's an unbelievable coach, very, very knowledgeable guy, amazing mentor, and he kind of took me and Liam Carmichael, who's head at March on Stratford, under his wing, and we both joined at the same time. And that was when I realized that there was a career, and there was, you know, a level within the coaching industry and the fitness industry that you didn't have to be an athlete. And I, you know, went ham sandwich on it and just tried to educate myself and give myself as much experience as I could. Was there for just over a year, and then couldn't get back from Hong Kong when I came back to the UK because of COVID. Then at that time, my boss Ed was saying maybe put some feelers out in the UK for some part-time work, some temporary work, and see if you can stay sharp on the coaching. And I'd never met Ollie Marchon, but he was someone that I'd followed for a while, and Marchon were a brand that I'd admired from afar for a while. And I just sent him a cold DM, literally being like, "Have you got any jobs, mate?" You know, it was a bit more of a pitch than that. It was, you know, Chad was writing the Perform program, and there was more and more CrossFit-y elements being involved in that. And, you know, not trying to talk smack, but like Ol and Chad hadn't really ever done CrossFit. They were, you know, bodybuilders and, you know, functional fitness people that were learning some of those skills, whereas I had spent quite a bit of time understanding and learning those. So I felt like I could add some value into those areas. What Up was the program that we were using before we built our own app to put everything on, and that was what we used in Hong Kong. I was the co-host of a podcast out in Hong Kong with Ed called the Process Podcast, and Ollie was talking about doing a podcast. So I was basically like, these are three areas that I think I can add value to your business. Let me know if you want a conversation. He just sent me a message saying, let's jump on a Skype call. That shows how long ago it was, because it was Skype. Yeah. So we jumped on a Skype call, and it was perfect. It was just kind of like stars aligned, because he was looking to open March on Stratford at the same time as I was looking for a job in London, or just a full-time employment. And he said, come down and let's have a training session together and come and meet the team. And then that was it. Rest is history. Joined March on in April of whatever it was, 22, and we opened March on Stratford in August of 22. Yeah. So it'll be Stratford's 4th birthday in August this year.
Wow.
So yeah, so I was there for 2.5 years. And we had always had plans of opening more centrally, because those of you that know London or have been to Stratford will know that it's actually missions away from anything else. So we always had intentions of moving more centrally into London as well, whilst keeping Stratford. And initially we were going to open in Vauxhall. That didn't work out, which is fortunate. And Victoria came about. Really good location, very well connected, and that's where we opened up. And the idea was that I was going to then go and set that up, having set up Stratford, and we've been open at Victoria for the last year now. We just literally last month had our 1st birthday, and gym's going well, having a great time. That's me.
Nice. I think one of the points to touch on there, and it's a huge value point, is how you reached out to Ollie. There'll probably be a lot of practitioners, coaches. You probably aren't aware of this, but in the physio world, there aren't any jobs. In the NHS, I think in London it's something like 1 to 40. There's up to 200 people that apply for any one job, and then they interview 40 people for one job. So you just end up getting lost in this sea of people, and I don't know what it is nationwide. But I'll regularly get people message me and just say, do you have any jobs available? When you obviously reached out to Ollie and trying to provide some, whether it's a coach, a physio, or something like that, some piece of valuable advice, what was your intent behind it? You did a lot of research, I imagine. You were very specific, obviously, in the 3 areas that you said.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone in that position now?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. You take, I mean, Ollie's following wasn't as big then as it is now, but he still had, 80,000 followers or something. So he gets a lot of DMs. You probably get however many hundreds of DMs over the course of a week and a month of people saying, how can I get to your level, or how do I get into the industry, or would you ever take on apprenticeship or whatever it is, or mentorship? And you have to stand out the same as you would in an interview process, and you have to, it needs to be reciprocal. You can't just be like, what can you do for me? It's like, what can I do for you? So how is someone going to think, oh, this guy knows exactly, is the person that we want, if you've just been like, hey bro, got any jobs? It's never going to work. Fortunately, Ollie actually had seen my face on social media because Liam had done the first SCA before it was the PFCA mentorship. So Ollie knew who Ed Haynes was, so I had a bit of some clout knowing that I had come from Coastal. So he's like, well, Ed wouldn't hire an idiot, so he probably is worth having a conversation with. But at the same time, still providing some value and thinking, how can I add value to this person as opposed to what can they give me?
I even had a message this morning, and you could tell it was just copy and paste of, hey, do you have any advice about how I can get a job and get started in the industry? And they've obviously sent it to a number of people. There's no individualisation, they don't mention, and not that they need to like pump my tyres up, but it is just like, I'm not going to invest the time and energy to come back to you. But on the flip side of that, last Friday, a lad walked in, old school, with his CV and said,
Legend.
Is Alex there? And just handed it over to me. I only had 5 minutes to give him, but he'll be the top of my thought process the minute we have our next role available. And I think that's probably just a valuable touch point. So, obviously, the journey is taking you through Asia, back to the UK. What does day to day now look like for you? Obviously, you're the head coach at March on Victoria, but then there's an online arm to it. I think you cover all of the programming across the gyms as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So my role is now is pretty mixed. So I'd say probably half of my time is spent, or 2/3 of my time is spent on March on gyms, and then 1/3 to half of my time, depending on where we are in training phases and stuff, is spent on online. So we have 4 gyms, but I'm kind of more in line with the 3 March on gyms that we have, which is Bath, Stratford and Victoria, which are all the same model and setup as what Stratford was when we opened it. Whereas Harpenden, which is our HQ site, is a small group personal training gym, a little bit different. It's not something that we want to align with the gyms that we've got right now, just because of the demographic, and there's over 300 members there. It's kind of like not something that we need to change drastically. So we're continuing on with the 3 gyms that we have, which is March on Stratford, Victoria and Bath. I write the program for all 3 of those gyms. We have the same program across. Obviously there will be adjustments required when we need to, but the idea is that you could go and train in Stratford one day and Victoria the next, and it be the same standard of coaching, the same class size, the same progressions week on week, however you go about it. So rather than it being franchised, it's like, everything's all in-house, it's all repeatable, consistent product. So I write the March on gyms, I oversee the quality of the coaching across all the sites as well. So I run the CPD sessions, I go to the other sites as regularly as I can, work with Liam and Justin, with the other coaches, watching sessions, making sure that we're doing what we can to have, firstly, a consistent coaching product, but the best that we can. Outside of March on gyms, then online, we have many programs, but we have the hybrid program, which was formerly the gain program, and the gain program. So the hybrid program is now a hybrid program, which is ultimately lifting and running and bodybuilding, and the gain program is purely a bodybuilding program. So hybrid program is probably done for someone that could train at Move or train at March on, where they've got racks available, they might have some cables available, they might have a machine or 2 available, but it's more of like a CrossFit functional fitness style space, and they want to do running. Whereas in gain program, it would be someone that is training in a bodybuilding style gym, hack squat, leg extension, leg press, etc. So between those 2 programs, we have about 2,000 people on hybrid and on the gain. So I program for 2,000 people there. We have about 1,000 people across the gyms, so I program for 1,000 people in the gyms as well. Manage the coaches from the coaching product, and then obviously the actual day-to-day of trying to run the business itself of March on Victoria, and we have targets in terms of sales and membership numbers that we need to hit to make sure that the business is profitable. We can continue to pay our coaches what they should be paid, and continue to make sure that we serve our members. So there's kind of like 3 different roles or hats that I have within that. I do a little bit for the PFCA as well, but not much. That's more a luxury every now and again.
Nice. And I think I can attest to the quality of that program. I did the game program for a long period of time. I've maybe Judased you a little bit and gone over to the train program at the moment.
That's right.
I just wanted to do a little bit more conditioning more than anything, a bit more functional fitness. But yeah, like the quality of it is really, really high, and it aligns with my philosophy, the move methodology, and I think that's probably why I felt so easily connected to yourself and to March On for a long period of time, because although they're very different sort of lenses that we look at things through, and it's like a more rehab lens, but the overarching principles around progressing someone physically align very, very well. And I think that probably leads me on. Obviously, you've gone through lots of different iterations as a coach. If you were to describe what your coaching philosophy looks like now, how would you describe that?
Just very quickly before I answer that, I would just reciprocate what you said to how I feel about you, because from a physio and a practitioner perspective, it's very difficult for someone that is, loves strength and conditioning and detail and programming. It's very hard to find physios that understand elements of that, and that aligns perfectly with move and performance programs, and exactly what you're trying to do is get someone from pain back to performance. Is I knew that I was in safe hands with the injuries that I had and came to you with, knowing that you have an understanding of S&C and how to actually train someone regardless of whether they're in pain or not. So, just to caveat that as well.
We'll come on to that in a second.
So you can pay me afterwards for the little plug that I did there. Thank you.
I'll clip that one up.
Yeah. So I think, like, my philosophy, I mean, it's such a broad question. I think it's evolved so much over the time. I think if I think about anything that's probably relevant right now today, I would say that the most important thing that I'm thinking about is, maybe that's just with where I am in my life right now, but it probably is adherence and enjoyment. Yeah. And I think that those 2 things always have to be at the forefront of your mind, whether you're coaching for someone online, whether it's for someone one-to-one in person, or whether it's for a group, is that if someone doesn't enjoy coming to the gym or enjoy the training that they're doing, or the way that they're training, or just in general they can't adhere to it because it's too complex or it's not something that they like, they're never going to get the results. And if you asked me maybe 18 months ago about hypertrophy, it would be really nerdy around internal moment arms and internal leverages and very deep biomechanics. And actually, we've side tangent, we've got in the back end of our March On Training app, we can now see of all the exercises that we've programmed in each program, how many people have actually done that exercise versus how many have swapped it out for something else. Yeah. So I've been programming this, mid-range biased delt exercise, and people have just gone, I want a barbell standing overhead press. And I can focus on the nuances and optimizing this program as much as I want. And Steve's just going to come in and be like, I'm just going to superset these because I've got 45 minutes before my missus is going to kick off that I've been at the gym again. So I'm just going to do a barbell strict press, and I'm going to superset it with a dumbbell row because the cable's over there and some idiot's on it in Pure Gym right now. And I think it's just we can fluff it up and we can overcomplicate it as much as we want for our own egos, but actually simplicity and adherence and enjoyment will probably trump everything else for training in the gym with March On gyms, and novelty and variety over optimizing. So I'd say that's probably right now where I feel like my philosophy's at.
It's really interesting you say that, and I was reminded of it because he put it on his story a couple of days ago, Matt Connolly and his Adherence triangle. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, it's really good.
And I remember he presented it at the summit, the PFCA summit, the first year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there was the three sides, and the third side was enjoyment. And I think, like, very similar to yourself, I'd always obsessed over, like, the clinical knowledge, the expertise, like, what position am I putting them in, and why am I choosing this exercise based off the biomechanical assessment, and where does it fit within, like, their objective markers and the journey as such. And I was, it said enjoyment, and I was like, well, yeah, those things don't matter if they hate doing it. And it was like, it was a big light bulb moment for me, and it's something that I've sort of distilled down into our team and into my coaching practice and rehab practice. And I guess it's really interesting. We've probably both gone through that same arc and got to that point, and it's where I'm at with my training. Like, I'm pleased you covered my identity by calling me Steve and not throwing my missus under the bus for whining at me for training, but that is me, and it's like, right, I want to get my program done as quickly as possible. I want to train with as much intensity as I can within the 40-45 minutes that I've got, and I'll just choose substitutes and swaps based on that. Have you found that that's changed how you've programmed then? This is my own interest more than anything. Like, in the app and the online program, have you tried to choose the exercises that people just go to the most, or have you still programmed what you think is best and allowed them to swap?
I've done both. So I've been experimenting with, and we'll look in the back end and be like, okay, well, I've created the program that's lowest barrier to entry and that the majority of the people are doing, because also our goal is to, as quickly as possible, get to 10,000 users across our app. That's our current goal at the moment, and we have a way to go yet, but the people that we're going to be ticking off or the people that are going to be purchasing online, the other 4,000 that we've got to go, are not going to be these really optimal athletes. They're probably going to be your average Joe Blogs and whoever it is that saw an advert of Ollie looking tanned and shredded and be like, I want to look like that, but don't really know what they're doing. I've probably bought a couple of PDFs here and there doing the old PT program that they did for the last 2 years, and they want simplicity, and they're probably not even executing a barbell overhead press that well anyway. So if I give them something too complex or ask them to find a squat press instead of a leg press, their gym doesn't have it. So what's the point with that anyway? So I think it's all we can do, as Jens loves to say, is iterate and just continue to review and be like, how did that go? How did that work? Now with the purists, are they bored by doing the barbell overhead press? And do we need to maybe hide a bit of veg in the food for those people as well, with what they enjoy, and find the balance between the two? So it's just having the not being bought into your ideas as much as possible, not have the blinkers on and try and be like, okay, well, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, then cool, that was a bit of a shit program, let's move on to and do something different.
Oh, nice. And were you finding a correlation between the people who swap the most things and churn? I haven't got that data. It'd be interesting to know, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think that I think really the churn is coming more so from people that feel like they can't personalize. I think that's probably more, rather than the program itself, is that everyone has their own individual nuances that they want to adjust. So the ability for them to be able to really almost semi-individualize all of those programs, I think, will be the next step up for us in terms of how we can keep people on the program for longer.
Like I said to you before, I can't sing the praises high enough. It makes my life a lot easier having someone that I trust, like yourself or Chad, with the training program to program for me. I just open and do. So
yeah.
Let's go back to you singing my praises and the reason you did sing my praises, and talk about injuries. So you've mentioned patella tendinopathies. Just let's give it a quick whistle-stop tour through the injuries you've suffered, and maybe sort of your experiences with those.
Yeah. Historically, prior to doing CrossFit and stuff like that, was actually very injury free. Didn't really have any bad injuries or broken bones or ACLs or anything like that when I was playing sport, in my teens. When I started doing CrossFit, I then started to feel the overuse of it. Started with my knees. I was getting some issues with shoulder stuff that was kind of like supraspinatus tendinopathy, I think. Again, overuse from just battering too many kipping pull-ups and probably not adhering to the volume that I should have done. Doing Smolov. Those of you that don't know, Smolov is it's a Russian squat cycle that was designed for people in the Soviet times that were hammering a lot of testosterone, and I wasn't hammering a lot of testosterone. I was doing a paleo diet whilst going out at university multiple times a week, doing back-to-back squat programs. So it'd be like a 8-week or 12-week intensive squat program, and then I would just run it again, no deload, and wondered why my knees hurt while I was doing a thruster workout that afternoon as well, and not responding to the strength training that I was doing. So all mistakes that we've made, but those niggles sort of carried me through, and I never really got to the end of it. And this was back in 2014 and 15 and 16, when I was really trying to go for it and was trying to do some competitions. Like, I didn't know anyone that was talking about isometrics or talking about how to actually improve tendinopathies. It was almost like rest and hope that it goes away kind of thing. Or from the research that I was doing myself, I didn't find any of that. So I just kind of felt like, it can't be cured. You just kind of have to hope that you're not one of those people that genetically have poorer tendons than others. Not thinking about the fact that I've just absolutely destroyed myself with a crazy amount of volume. So those are probably the things that are really started to sort of identify myself as a bit broken. I got a bit of a dramatic video. I got crushed by scaffolding in the Middle East. Have you seen the video?
No, I didn't even know that.
Oh, mate, I dislocated my ankle. It was I'll have to repost it on my social media for anyone that's listening to this. But it basically was emceeing a CrossFit competition. They hadn't tied down the scaffolding properly, and where the clock and the timer was connected to, it literally just fell over on me.
I have seen it. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen it. I do remember that now. Yeah.
Flattened like a pancake. Yeah. And I was very lucky. Like, if I'd have stepped one step further, I would probably be dead. So I was lucky to only come out with like a dislocated ankle, but that's pretty fused together now, and doesn't have a massive impact on me day to day. And then when I was in Hong Kong and I was going through a bit of a powerlifting phase, I had a bit of, whether it was a disc inflammation or a partial herniation. Never got an MRI on it, but didn't really felt like I needed to. It was just my back's fucked from doing deficit deadlifts on 4 hours sleep, 180 kilos, and didn't have any right to be able to do it. Set up, braced in extension, and then ended up in Jefferson curl by the end of it. And then I had actually then partially torn my meniscus and my ACL squatting down to pick something up at a wedding, completely stone cold sober. That was like a freak accident, and that was when I approached you. Was when I was potentially then going to get surgery, and you had advised, let's try and rehab it without getting surgery because we probably don't need to. And and then at the same time we were kind of addressing some of the stuff with my back. That's probably, I've jumped off a waterfall, broke my wrist. I've had other little bits and bobs, but I'd say the two most debilitating, the ACL and the meniscus, actually, with your support, I have little to no, it has no impact on me whatsoever. So that process was actually fine. And I have nothing with my tendinopathies on my knees at all now, like whatsoever. So, but I would say of all the things that were most debilitating, it was my back, and it was my tendinopathies when I was doing CrossFit that really stopped me from being able to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think especially with the tendinopathies, it's so common in my world, and probably in your world as well. Like we touched on before, we actually hit record. the amount of people who overtrain and underfuel and therefore under recover, sort of wrapping in all of the other aspects of recovery around like fueling and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to sort of speak to that person now, and maybe if it is like a conversation you probably have in the gym on a semi-regular basis, what are you saying to them from a coaching perspective? Obviously, I can give a clinical physio perspective, but they probably align very, very much.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would be relatively simplistic if I can to just keep it simple for them, but it would be like you probably just did a little bit too much of what your body was able to handle. Was there a specific thing that you did and it felt like it really hurt? Oh yeah, we did that high rocks workout and I had 150 wall balls in it and my knees were really sore the next day. I was like, it was probably that you did 150 reps that you haven't done for a long time. You didn't really earn the right to be able to do that. I've been...
Ever.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing this 12-week marathon block and I'm running 4 times a week. What sort of running were you doing before that? Maybe like a run every 3-4 weeks. Oh, cool. So you went from running 0 kilometers to 70 kilometers in 2 weeks. Yeah. Okay, cool. It's probably that you just did a little bit too much too soon. So I think the volume management conversation is a big thing there, alongside maybe some exercises that would be relevant to that person.
The question I ask people all the time is, have you ever done that before? And then it's like, okay, so you've never done the 150 wall balls in a single workout before, and you've never ran 70 kilometres in a week, and you've never ran 30 kilometres in a single run. And then it's that second layer of, have you built up to that and earned the right to do it? Exactly the same conversation. And the amount of people that just say, no, it is mind-blowing, but I guess it's twofold. The problem with social media, because it just normalises a lot of those things, and then the second one is like poor quality of coaching, which obviously in our world we don't feel that we have that, particularly like your links into the PFCA, like I mentioned, and some of the education things that we do, but it's still the general delivery across the board in the industry, across both industries really, in my opinion, isn't where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's keeping physios really busy at the moment is the running boom, and it's like, I just cramped up at like 32 kilometers into my marathon. I don't know what happened. It's like, what was the longest run that you did on your marathon block? 30 kilometers. It's like, okay. What pace are you going? I wanted to go a bit quicker than what I was doing on my marathon training. It's like, do you think you think it was the electrolytes, do you, as to why you cramped? Yeah. No, it wasn't, buddy.
And how much strength training were you doing to lift the bar of your tolerance? I kind of did like a Pilates session a week. All right, okay. So the pieces of the puzzle start adding together, don't they?
Yeah, for sure.
When you were describing your injuries, one of the things you said was like, identify as injured. And I think like obviously we touch on like the physical things quite a lot. How did you find like the mental side of it, particularly being a coach and sort of that being your physical capability being part of your identity? How did you find that part of the process?
It is so debilitating. It's like, you get DOMs, you get dragged into a GHD sit-up workout. You have DOMs for a week and you don't realize how much you use your abs until they're chronically sore, and then you're like, oh my god, I can't cough, I can't do anything, whatever. It's like you don't realize how much you use your body in certain things, particularly if you're someone who coaches how many hours a day, how much you need to bend down, how much you need to bend your knee or whatever. So when you can't do that, you realize just how debilitating it is. And it's the same. I would describe my knee issues similar to my back, where you anticipate the pain before it's happened. So you're reluctant to just let your heels come off the ground and your knees go forward to pick up something that's in a weird position, knowing that usually it hurts you. You don't reach the dumbbell forward at the bottom rack and round your back because you're scared that it's going to go. And it takes a while. It takes time for you to rewire that neuroplasticity that you're not injured, let alone that you identify as someone who feels like they can't do what they want to be able to do. And I think that was a big thing that I learned from you, was just We just need to reteach your body that it's okay to go into those positions. Like, for example, now a warm up that I love at the moment is like sort of like deep tier plyos of like frog jumps, basically. Get the members to do it all the time, where like before they squat, they're sort of like squatting, like bottoming out into the bottom of the squat, rolling their foot forwards on the floor. So they're getting, going into sort of deep end ranges. And I demo that every morning, and every time we coach it, and I never feel anything in my knees. But that sort of movement would be the worst possible pain that I could imagine to do with my knees. And it's just, I would be so hesitant to do that, because you identify as the moment your body knows that you're going to go into that position, you're going to get this flare up or you're going to get the discomfort. So it takes reps, and it takes time for you to just change the identity of you being able to do X movement, or for you to just be someone that isn't injured.
Yeah, definitely. And do you feel like it impacted maybe on more of like an emotional level how you showed up as a coach? Because obviously there's the frustration attached with it, there's probably like feelings of loss and things like that. Like, do you feel like that changed at the time how you showed up, and probably now how you coach as well?
I think a big thing for me personally was, like I was saying, kind of realizing that I wasn't going to make the level that I wanted to make. And part of that was because I just couldn't consistently bank. Like, my legs were always weak. I'm much more a hinger than I am a squatter, and you need to be a good squatter to be a CrossFitter. You need really strong legs, and like my lifts, my snatch and my clean and jerk were always high compared to Russian average percentages that would be a ballpark based off of my squat numbers. But I just needed to get my legs stronger, which was why I was doing all of these back-to-back squat programs. So then when I couldn't do that, I'm like, well, I can't do the thing that I need to do. And it was when I then when I was talking about joining Hong Kong, the gym in Hong Kong at Coastal, and switching my identity, and I became a coach first and an athlete second, as opposed to an athlete first that coaches. And when I was in the Middle East, it was, my identity was that I was wanting to become a CrossFit athlete as best I could, and I coached on the side, and that was a way for me to pay for my Pizza Express at the weekend or whatever it was. Whereas that was when I switched, because I saw the other coaches, and knowing that I had this back flare up, I had my knee issues, whatever, I wasn't as strong as I wanted to be. I felt comfort in that it was no longer my most important goal. My most important goal was to become the best coach. I think that if I didn't have that, and I didn't have an alternative path to go down, it would have been a lot harder on me emotionally. But like, for example, when I came to you, I was very much, I'm a coach first and I'm an athlete second. So my ability to be able to withstand the emotional, sadness that I felt not being able to physically do what I wanted to do was like, I'm not in any rush here really. I just want to be able to I would love to get back to be able to squat heavy. I'd love to get to be able to rip a deadlift off the floor and not feel like my back was going to go. But it's not my identity and it's not my career, because as much as I need to be able to do that for my job, I also don't need to deadlift over 200 kilos. I can just move. I need to be able to coach, and I need to be able to demonstrate what I need to. So if I hadn't have changed my identity when I was going through that, I would have found those injuries a lot harder, I think. Yeah. So I totally sympathize with those people that are actual professional athletes that have debilitating injuries that stop them from doing what they can do. Their identity really does take a battering.
Definitely. It's not just sort of professional athletes. From what we see, there's even people that come to our gym and clients at March On that we work with, and they have that, because obviously exercise is so many different utilities and outlets for people, and it's like one injury just strips you of your social circle, one injury just strips you of your routine and your schedule, and that's one of the most challenging things that we find for people.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's move on to the expert topic. I hoped you were going to bring your white lab coat with you to recreate the infamous...
It's on the back of the door if you want me to pop it on.
But linking back to Dr. Gaines, we're going to talk about hypertrophy, and like I say, I believe it's one of your specialist areas, and we could talk about it on multiple different levels. But for anyone listening, whether they're a practitioner, whether they're a client, what is hypertrophy, and why should someone care about it?
It's the growth of muscle, very simply, and in multiple different ways, whether we are increasing in myofibrils or whether sarcomerogenesis, if you want to look up what they are. But ultimately, we're increasing the cross-sectional area of our muscles, and we do that through repeated resistance training over time, applying some form of tension to the muscle and doing it consistently. And our muscle over time adapts, which allows us to then increase the amount of weight or the amount of reps or the amount of tension that we're applying to the muscle. That's important for so many things, whether it's ability to be able to produce force from an athletic perspective, whether that's to avoid muscle loss when we get older, whether that's to increase bone density, whether that's someone that has insulin resistance, or they are insensitive to insulin, increasing the amount of muscle mass that they have, they will become more sensitive. So there are unbelievable amount of benefits to increasing muscle mass, and that doesn't mean you need to become an elite level bodybuilder. You just need to have a decent amount of muscle mass on your frame, and I think that pretty much everyone can benefit within reason to increasing muscle mass.
Definitely. And I think obviously I always feel that people are surprised at to hear is like, I want to get shredded and I want to look leaner. And one of the conversations we regularly have with people at Move is, well, if you increase your muscle mass, your metabolism increases, so actually you can eat more while still achieving the goal of looking leaner, plus the benefits of having more muscle mass, which will shape you and allow you the appearance of being leaner. What are the sort of the biggest myths or misunderstandings that you see with hypertrophy training or building muscle in general?
I think I would actually say I think something that's really left over at the moment is obsession around reps and rep ranges. I think that's something that matters very little in the grand scheme of things. There's probably closer to an ideal rep range. That, you know, a ballpark would probably be maybe somewhere between 5 to 10. But really, and that, you know, then it might be a little bit different based off of the size of the muscle or whether it's a single joint or a multiple joint movement or exercise. But actually, what matters is training with a relatively high intensity, and that's what is going to create the stimulus that's going to allow our body to biologically adapt to the training that we've given it. So if we are always sandbagging the intensity of training, whether that's because the reps are too high or whether that's because we aren't really that involved in it or we don't really want to pull the trigger on it, I think that the most important thing that we can do is train relatively close to failure, or train with some high intensity. And it doesn't really matter whether you're doing 5 reps, 6 reps, 10 reps, 15 reps. The most important thing is that we're training relatively hard, and hard is obviously going to be dependent on the person. 65-year-old Janice that's just walked into the gym does not need to be going 0 RIR on a hack squat. That would probably bury her for weeks. But, you know, someone that's been coming to the gym for 6 months, a year, 2 years can probably train with a decent amount of intensity. And that's probably what is missing in their training to allow for them to progress over this perfect rep range that they'll be hitting. Another myth that I would say is people focusing on muscle damage and pumps or metabolic stress, particularly damage. I think people think that the more work is always better, and it isn't. Actually, the amount of sets and reps that you need to create the majority of the stimulus is really, really low if you're training with a decent amount of intensity. Like, we're talking a couple of sets a week, multiple times a week, is going to be more than sufficient for you to get a hypertrophic response. And more importantly, the lower that your volume, the greater your intensity can be. you do 10 sets of 10 back squat with the goal of trying to build muscle. By the time you get to set 4, you're pretty smoked, and you're just digging a hole for you to have to recover from. And I think that it's similar to anything else, whether it's running volume, whether it's cycling, whether it's whatever, strength training. Actually, more isn't always better. The quality of the work is just as important. So I think, thinking that we need to be doing massive pump sets, or we need to be creating as much damage as we possibly can, and doing loads of drop sets and loads of surf the racks and stuff like that. Actually, you'll probably be better off doing a couple of sets and training relatively hard, and that will be the dose that you need, and you don't need to completely bury yourself. So I would say obsession over the rep ranges, and I would say thinking that we need to be as sore as we possibly can and create as much damage as we can for us to be able to get the most gains.
No, definitely. And I think you touched on it in there, and one of the conversations that I have and we have as a physio and a coaching team really regularly is around what training with intensity actually is, and because most people in the general public don't understand that, and whether that's because they've not been there, or they're fearful of going there, or there's just no appreciation of what hard is. Is that something you experience? And if so, how do you coach someone through that process?
I think it's different for someone that's online, and it's different for someone that's in the gym. I think I can have a lot more of an impact on someone as you can in person versus online. I think that for someone training online, it's probably a case of maybe not being too prescriptive and trying to encourage intensity, because in most cases they are, as you say, undercooking, and they don't really know what intensity is. I think that something that I find really valuable with members is I often film sets, particularly when we're doing maybe rep maxes or we're doing exercises in general, and I'll show them back and they're like, oh, it felt heavy, but actually it's moving fast. I'm like, yeah, you got probably another 10 kilos in there, dude. And people don't, the limiting beliefs and the cap that they put on themselves is, it can be vast versus what they're actually capable of. And it doesn't mean we need to absolutely bury everyone into the ground every single time they come into the gym, but understanding at times going to a point of failure or doing some testing, or guys, I just want you to go down to maybe 5 or 6 reps and just go and get the heavier dumbbells and see what happens. And if you do it for 3 reps, that's okay. If you end up doing it for 5 or 6 reps, then you were probably undercooking your sets before. And like we're on we just finished week 12 of our 12-week training phase in the gyms, and that was exactly the comms that we had on some of the accessory movements, things like dumbbell bench press and barbell RDLs. Is like, just chuck another 5 kg on and see what happens. And if you only want to do it for a couple of reps and it feels heavy, then sack it off. But you'll probably find that you can do more than you think. And which is, again, goes back to like this obsession over needing to hit 5 reps or 6 reps or 7 reps or whatever. Like, the reps don't matter that much. Just train.
I think, again, you touched on it there, like the speed of the reps. Like, we can talk about reps in reserve and RPE and percentages and things like that, but actually probably the most meaningful cue that we've sort of introduced within how we coach, again, online and in person, is the speed of the rep. Why is that important, potentially for a coach or anyone listening? Why is that important, and why is it probably the easiest indicator of appropriate intensity?
Well, I think from a strength perspective, it's important because you're trying to move with intent, and you want that the meters per second or the bar speed to be relatively fast. And we know that when we get to a certain speed or bar speed, that we're probably getting towards failure. I can't remember what the exact drop-off is in terms of meters per second, but when the concentric gets towards this point, you're starting to get close towards failure. That's typically where a back squat or a bench press will fail. And it's just a good indication as to whether someone is stimulated and feeling fresh versus someone that isn't. And bar speed can be impacted by the environment and how much caffeine you've had and how much sleep you've had and how many carbs you've had or whatever. So it's all really good indicators. From a hypertrophy perspective, and an involuntary slowing down of the concentric rep is what matters. That's when the bar speed or the rep speed starts to slow down without you trying to slow it down. You're trying to move the bicep curl quickly, but it's slowing down because you've either created fatigue or because it's hard or because it's heavy. That's when we get this, from the science perspective, more of this cross-bridging that happens between the actin and the myosin, which is where we get this ever so slightly better hypertrophic response. And that doesn't, again, that your members or your clients probably don't need to know that, but if we can train with relative intensity where the reps start to slow down, those slower reps are the ones that create the greater hypertrophic benefit. So if we have never got to a point where the reps ever start to slow down, we're probably leaving some reps or some kilos on the table. And if we're only in the gym for 45 minutes, we want those 45 minutes to be meaningful, so we might as well train and get the stimulus that we're trying to get from it.
I think one of the things I'd like to do is bridge, actually before we do that, if you were to give someone who's listening to this a general framework to optimize recovery across a week, what would that look like in terms of, and I know sort of sets and reps aren't necessarily the key thing, but like sets, reps, relative intensities, frequency, what do you look at if you were programming for someone?
For hypertrophy?
Yes, yeah.
I would start on the lower end of it, and I would look at, could we get 2 to 3 sets multiple times a week per muscle group that we're trying to train. And that's probably, we could do one set 4 times a week, 4 times a week, and that would create maintenance towards hypertrophy. That's what the research shows. Or if we could do 2 to 3 sets multiple times a week, that's better for hypertrophy, where we have that the spike in muscle protein synthesis, which starts to drop after a couple of days or after 24 hours. And then if we can get another spike by training again, that's beneficial. So if we can get a frequency of at least twice a week, maybe 3 times a week in a muscle, that's better than us doing it once a week probably. And going back to bro splits, that's why I typically don't condone it, because the people that have been doing bro splits are on a lot of anabolic steroids, usually the ones that get the benefit from it, and that slows down the drop off of muscle protein synthesis. So it's it is an artificial style of training for someone that is not enhanced. So if we could get 2 to 3 sets multiple times a week of a muscle group, ideally the same exercise or a similar exercise that's working that muscle group is probably going to be better than doing 2 completely different exercises. But going back to what we were talking about in terms of coaching philosophy, sometimes a repeatable session might not be the best adhered, might not be the most enjoyed. And when we talk about intensity being important, someone that prefers a certain bicep curl variation is probably going to train it at higher intensity versus a bicep curl that might be more optimal, but they don't enjoy it as much. So who knows how to quantify the difference between those two? But if we can find an exercise that is going to give us pretty much what we want, and it's something that person enjoys, and then maybe we add a bit of variety for them to stay fresh and engaged, that could probably be a better program than one that is really repeatable and optimal that's a bit boring. So hit the muscle group 2 to 3 sets a couple times a week is where I would start. And then if there's something that you might want to double down on, like bicep and tricep development, like quad development, if you're recovering well from it and you're not chronically sore and you're seeing progress over the course of the weeks, either through an increase in reps or an increase in weight, that means that the stimulus that you're giving your body is able to recover from. Whereas if we go the other end of the spectrum and we're like, okay, we're going to do 10 sets of 10, you might not see that much progress because you're so buried after a few weeks that you can't actually adapt to the training, which is why I would always say start on the lower end and do a couple of sets a couple of times a week. And then if you feel like you want to tolerate more volume, you could. But in most cases, if you're training well in terms of intensity, you'll see that progress anyway. So I would keep it on the low end and see how you go.
And one of the things I'd like to do is sort of link hypertrophy into rehab. And I know rehab isn't your area of expertise, but I'm sure we can create lots of value for someone either that's rehabbing someone or going through rehab. Obviously, in rehab, one of the primary factors of the KPIs that we will always look at is cross-sectional muscle volume. We want to restore that. We typically lose that post-injury, particularly with periods of deload, rest, post-surgery and things like that. Intensity is a harder thing to find in the early to mid stages just because of the needing to protect the injured site. What variables would you probably think would be the most, or the safest and the most effective to manipulate for someone looking to grow new muscle tissue without being able to maybe push to an intensity that would risk damage to the joint?
I would probably, the first thing that I'm thinking of is probably making sure that the exercise selection is something that is appropriate. So if we have access to things like pin and plate loaded machines, single joint exercises where we can isolate the muscle that we're trying to work, that's probably going to be a lot safer, and people will be able to find relative intensity easier doing those kind of things in a much more controlled environment. Lots of stability. It's very easy to progress over time because, you know, you drop in the pin by one hole each time is going to be quite comfortable for you to do over the weeks, whether that's, you know, something like a hamstring curl or a leg extension or a cable chest press or something like that. You know, a nice fixed stable environment where you're not going to be biasing, or versus you doing something like a barbell back squat, which requires a lot of stability and a lot of coordination that might have been lost through injury. If we can just fix you, and regardless of whether you're injured or not, we're just trying to extend and flex your knee, that's probably going to be a better environment for you to start to find that intensity. And then when we've developed both neurally and some of the cross-sectional area back from the injury, we could then start to expose you to some more challenging environments that might require a bit of coordination, that might require a bit more balance. That's probably where I would go to first.
Nice. And I guess outside of some of the exercise selection, and maybe looking more through like a lifestyle lens, are there any specific parameters you would give someone to hit, or focuses around nutrition, sleep, and bits like that?
Yeah, I mean, the principles apply whether it's trying to optimize performance or whether it's trying to rehab from injury. Those foundations will always be the foundations, which is trying to improve the duration, increase the duration of sleep, trying to improve the quality of sleep, trying to improve the quality of your nutrition, whether that is prioritizing enough protein that your body is going to be able to actually have the amino acids available to be able to repair and recover, firstly from the injury, but also the training that you're doing on top of it, making sure that you are trying to reduce the amount of processed foods that you're eating and thinking about the quality and the density of the nutrition that you're eating as well. Getting regular feedings throughout the day rather than going to an intermittent fasting or one meal a day. You're probably going to be better off spreading out some of that protein throughout the day, improving your gut health by getting plenty of fiber in, eating carbohydrates for you to be able to have energy in training. All of the stuff that we would talk about for someone that's wanting to double down on their performance or for their improving their health generally would be exactly the same for rehabbing and trying to develop muscle mass again.
I think it's probably a nice touch point. One of the biggest behavioural changes and mistakes that people make when they get injured is they think, oh, I'm doing less, so I'm going to eat less. And like post-injury, particularly like a major injury, your metabolic rate increases by 20 to 30%. And you're losing muscle because you're not using a joint. You're then aiming to gain muscle, which, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is best done in a calorie surplus. And you're probably coming from a place of an increased output of 20 to 30%, and people just, again, under fuel. I don't know if you have any experience with that, or if you've got any like general guidelines or recommendations around maybe how much protein, calorie-wise. I know it's very hard and it's very individual, but if you were to give some sort of rough advice around that.
Again, for the majority of the people that you, and probably anyone that is a practitioner or a coach listening to this, simplicity is going to be easy for them to follow. Yes, there's protein ranges that we talk about. The general meta-analysis is like 1.6 to 2.2. People have increased protein from that. People have taken their protein down from that. But a nice simple number to remember is 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Obviously, if you are morbidly obese, that might not be as relevant. But if you're an averagely, 10 to 30% body fat, you probably want to be having around 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. From a hypertrophy perspective, that's plenty. From a recovery perspective, that's plenty. And a lot of people will probably struggle to do that in their 3 meals, so they might need to get some snacks in there. I think that's the simplicity is probably going to be the easiest thing for them to do. Just going off of the calorie surplus thing, it's a bit of a debated topic at the moment as to whether you need to be in a surplus or whether it's at maintenance. But by being in a surplus, you know that you're not in a deficit. So if you cover the bases and you give your body the nutrients and all the fuel it needs for you to be able to recover, you know that you're ticking that box rather than risking erring on the side of caution. And I would say, again, from a performance perspective, just as much as a recovery perspective, it takes very little time for you to lose body fat. It takes a long time for you to build muscle, and it takes a long time, and it can take a long time for you to recover fully from an injury, particularly if it's substantial. So would you not rather prioritize the recovery and know that in an 8, 10, 12 week period, we could be talking, 8, 10, 12 kg of body fat lost quite comfortably? Like, that's not unheard of at all for people to be able to do, where if they're diligent with their nutrition and their training. So in the grand scheme of things, and I've battled with that many times, the difficulty of eating for performance or eating to recover, feeling like you're turning skinny fat, lost the aesthetics that you had before. So then you start to pull back on the calories and you just go into a vicious cycle where you're not recovering or you're not rehabbing from the injury that you had. So you're further away from the point where you can actually train properly, just as much as you are focused on getting fluffier, when actually you're better off focusing on one thing and be like, cool, I'm going to double down on my recovery, make sure that I'm giving my body everything it needs, because in the grand scheme of things, I can take off that extra puppy fat that I've gained in a very short space of time if I'm diligent. I think that people fear the weight gain if they've never lost it before. I remember the first time that I was working with a nutritionist and I got really lean, I was like, my metabolism isn't broken. I can do it. I just need to be diligent. And once you've done it once, you know that you can do it again. And it's kind of like, I know what's required of me to get down to like 6% body fat or 8% body fat. I don't want to get down there again because it's miserable. But I think in the grand scheme of things, giving your body what it needs will pay you dividends in the long term, and then you can take the fat off in time, in a short space of time.
I think, sort of, to wrap things up, one of the things that has highlighted to me just how deep your knowledge is in this area, even though we've not maybe dug really deep into some of like the mechanisms and the metabolic environments and things like that. I've got a list of about 8 questions, and I think I've asked you 3 or 4, and we've covered all 8 of those questions. So like it's really nice to see. And again, like I say, I very much value you as a coach, your area of expertise, and I appreciate you coming on. I guess 2 things really. What's next for you? What's next for March on? And then where can people find you and follow you and reach out if they have any questions?
So next for me personally, I'm currently training for an Ironman. So I've got that, which is taking up a decent amount of time at the moment. But fortunately the weather's nice, so I can't complain. I'm doing that in September, so that's about 10 weeks away. Looking forward to ticking that off, getting that done. In terms of
process?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. There are times where you're like, oh, God, 6 hours on the bike, and my missus is like, okay, well, what are we doing when you get back? I'm like, well, what I'm going to be doing is lying on the sofa when I get back. But yeah, sure, we'll go out to the park and whatever. It's a very time-consuming thing, but I do really enjoy it, and I love cycling. I enjoy running, hate swimming, but I'm somewhat enjoying the process of getting better at it. So yeah, so I've got that for March on. The goal for us really is no different than what we've been doing for the last year at Victoria, which is continue to grow the membership base, continue to develop the coaches that work with me and for myself and for March on. Continue to develop hybrid and gain and refine it. There isn't really anything massive that's on the horizon with us. You know, there are rumours of other locations within the gyms, but there are other priorities within the business in terms of online and supplements that we're pushing right now. So right now it's very much a case of buttoning down the hatches and continuing to do what we do on the day-to-day to continue to grow the business. So nothing mega exciting, unfortunately, for anyone out there that's expecting us to open 5 more locations in London. And then what was the other question?
How can people find you?
How can people find me? Instagram's probably best. Patrick_James_coach. I do have a YouTube channel, but I haven't done anything on it for probably about a year, which is a shame because at one point I was pumping them out once a week. But as you know, it's when you're a busy boy, it's super time consuming. I'd love to be able to.
Yesterday. You did post yesterday.
I did. That was yeah. I mean, that's just yeah. That's more. It was more a vessel for me to do a long form piece of content for the members rather than me thinking this is a super valuable piece of information for everyone that is on the YouTube. But, you know, I'm sure there's some value, hopefully.
I think there is, mate. When people think about like the mindset, the methodology, the people, I think actually seeing how you deliver that to your clients is really valuable. I know that because I watch it myself. So.
Cool. Well, that's good to hear. I'm good to hear.
No,
yeah.
Mr. Patrick Arthur Henry James. I think I've got the middle two right.
Henry Arthur, close.
Henry Arthur. I got them. At least I remembered them. At least I remembered your 4 first names. No, thank you very much, mate. I do appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and anyone that is listening and wants to follow Paddy's journey and ask him any questions. He's a fountain of knowledge and he's always forthcoming with helping. So please do reach out to him.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much.